Welcome to the 12th District in session, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kerry Condado reporting for NCW Life. Well, we have about reached the end of the in session portion of our program because this session should be ending. But all odds are off right now. We'll know by the time this program airs which way it went, and we'll continue in session as long as necessary till things wrap up. I'd like to thank all of you for really dialing in and watching our McCleary-based show and our budget shows. Both of those shows have been very popular and are on demand on ncwlife.com. Don't forget, any of these shows you can watch on demand at any time, ncwlife.com, and you need to know the facts. You're not going to get it anywhere else because nobody has the experience that I do. I've been there, I know what's going on behind the scenes, and I'm going to let you know. So check out those on-demand shows. We're going to come back and review the McCleary Show just briefly and tell you a new twist on that one. And then we're going to talk about the budget, the taxes that are on the table, affirmative action. A new speaker for the first time in 20 years is going to happen. That's a for sure now. And a lot of other issues surrounding this session. We'll also get to our legislators, I hope, as long as they're available. I know they're working around the clock to try to get out of there on time, but we hope we'll be able to get them on the air later in the show and see what they think about this potential overtime situation. All right, thanks for being with us. We'll be right back and we'll review some of these very controversial subjects. All right, welcome back to the 12th District. Well, this could be one of the last in-session shows we do, or maybe not. We're going to find out in the next few days, the next week, whether this is going to continue. We will be talking to our state legislators. We are fortunate enough to get them today. They are in all kinds of meetings. There's all kinds of drama happening in Olympia as people negotiate this final budget, but the negotiations are between the same party. It's the Senate Democrats, House Democrats. At this point have not come to an agreement, and so we do not know at this point whether they will have a special session or not, but it looks like they will. Now, let's review where we're at in a couple of areas. I want to go back to the McCleary situation because there's something to add on to it. I want to again thank all of you that have watched that show on demand. It really breaks out what's happened over the past 20 years in education. And that story is not over with as we see the teachers rallying in Spokane over the weekend to try to force the legislature to raise the levy lid, which was part of the McCleary decision to start with, and try to increase funding even further after a $9.5 billion injection over the last few years. They want even more, and they are threatening a statewide strike in September if they do not get that very thing from the legislature. Now, again, we go back to all the things that happened prior, but them moving that $2 billion bubble forward is what caused this problem because it gave the schools a false security of a budget when they didn't really have it. And so we can put a lot of blame on everybody, but the fact is, we're in a bit of a pinch right now, and we cannot afford to roll back the McCleary decision in any way, shape, or form. And for if any other reason is there's more taxes on the way besides that. Let's take a little review quickly of the current budget situation. What is on the table? Well, what's on the table is a budget somewhere between $52 and $53 billion. Let's go back to our budget show a few weeks ago and remember that in 1985 it was only $8 billion, in 1995 it was $15 billion, and by 2005 it was $23 billion. Took a little over 100 years to get to $23 billion, and 15 years later we're looking at $53 billion. Yeah. That's not going to play well in the long run, especially if we have another economic downturn. But to get to $53 billion, you have to do this. You have to add $4.5 billion in new taxes, including a capital gains income tax, which is not even technically constitutional, a pretty heavy increase on B&O tax to a business community that is already running tight because they are the most taxed businesses, the small businesses of almost any state in the union, including high payroll taxes, and now looking at a $13.50 minimum wage, $13.50 minimum wage in January. This is called piling on, folks, and the small business guys aren't too excited. Now, when we get back to the school side of things, there's not one property tax on the line, but two. That's right, because the state had temporarily lowered the rate to $240 per thousand on the state part of this, and now it goes to $270 because they did not renew the $240. So that's the state portion going from $240 to 30 cents up to $270. And then we have the potential of this lift in the levy lid from $1.50 to $2.50. This is a major, major property tax increase. Now, let's add on a few other things. We just found out that there will be a tax potentially in the capital budget on petroleum companies, which will substantially raise the cost of fuel, both heating and basically anything that's petroleum-based, fuel and autos and diesel. And then on top of that, the Clean Air Act, which you saw just signed into law by the governor, will add substantially to that price again. So we have numerous taxes, plus property taxes, plus fuel taxes, plus energy taxes coming out of that clean air bill also. Folks, I think you can see the writing on the wall. If all this comes together, we will have one of the most expensive states to live in and to do business in anywhere in the U.S. Why? We have a tremendous economy. We have tremendous increase in revenue, far beyond population or inflation. And yet they want more. I have never seen anything like it in my 20 years in this business, and I can't conceive this is what's going to happen, but next week we'll find out, I guess, for sure. There are other issues to talk about. Affirmative action may be back. A legislative initiative to the legislature, is now in front of the legislature. If they pass it through, it will go to the ballot next fall, and we'll get a chance to see whether we really want affirmative action brought back. An initiative several years ago stopped affirmative action in the state of Washington because it was creating so much reverse discrimination that the business community just really worked hard to get rid of it, and frankly, it was a good thing to do. If we go back to affirmative action, I believe it'll set race relations back 20 years because of the divide it creates. And frankly, it's been unnecessary, particularly here in the 12th District, where our folks are of every race, creed, and color are doing very well, thank you, without affirmative action. So that is a big deal, and that will be decided in the next few days as well. Speaker Chop will be replaced. That's official now. He will end his term. There are two candidates that look like they could possibly be replacing him. Lori Jenkins from the Seattle area and Monica Stonier from the Vancouver area, Vancouver, Washington, of course. Both fairly hardcore left-wing candidates. I would say it's interesting that Mr. Chop is now considered too conservative for the position and is being retired. I don't think personally it's voluntary, by some much more progressive left candidates. This could be very interesting moving forward. Also, another controversial issue is the State Patrol is being forced by the Attorney General to release the names of the people that sold back their bump stocks. That's right, you heard about the bump stock bill, one of the craziest bills and ridiculous bills so far this year. But so these folks, voluntarily turned in their bump stocks, got $150 a piece. And frankly, now their names and addresses may be released because the AG says they're not protected. So there is a bill to try to reverse that. I hope that happens. And who's going to float that bill to try to protect people? Well, none other than Matt Shea. Now, if you haven't heard that name, he's been on this show. He will be back on this show in a few weeks because he is under fire from the left about some emails and some correspondence that he didn't actually participate directly in, but they are saying he did, and they're asking for him to step down. Matt, don't even think about it. This is the kind of attack that forced Matt Manweller out of office, and subsequently no proof of anything Matt Manweller did was found, but these kind of political tricks are the latest in politics. This is the new thing, attack and attack and attack more. Matt Manweller and Matt Shea together are two of the most successful and powerful conservatives in the legislature, and so they are making every attempt, A, to get rid of Matt Shea, but B, I would say my opinion is it's also a smokescreen during these negotiations. In case those taxes come out, they're looking to cover as much as they can with other stories. This has been the way politics have been operating lately. Not a good thing, and we hope that Matt makes it through. I worked with him for years. He's a very solid guy, very smart guy, but he's also a very tough guy, and I think he'll do just fine. There are so many more controversial bills. We'll be going over them after the session ends. We will go down and look at them more thoroughly, particularly the long-term care bill, which creates $1 billion payroll tax. We're going to look at that. We'll probably spend a whole show, frankly, on that one. It's an amazing poorly written, poorly designed program, completely unnecessary, and going to, again, drive the cost of doing business up even higher. Well, there you have it. We're going to come back and see what our legislators think, whether they're going to be there or not be there, or what's going on behind the scenes. We'll be right back with the 12th District in session. Well, welcome back. We're very fortunate to catch up with our two legislators. The schedule in the last week of this session is hectic. It goes up, it goes down, and nobody knows for sure what's happening. But let's see if we can get the latest. Welcome aboard, Mike. Keith, what is going on in Olympia? Nobody can tell me.
Yeah, it is. As you know, Carrie, we're in the throes of chaos right now. We have spent a lot of long nights. Those of us negotiating budgets have been here well into the evening, well past where we should be, and we are seeing an incredible amount of potential spending in spite of a strong economy, in spite of coming into session with nearly $4 billion of extraordinary revenue. It's a challenge to sit and write these budgets, and what I will tell you from the capital budget perspective, one of the things that's been really challenging is, for the first time in the history of Washington State, it looks like we're going to see a tax inside the capital budget, nearly $500 million in MOTCA.
Oh, yes, and this would be leveraged on the petroleum companies primarily?
Correct.
So
yeah, it's barrel.
Would this add to the cost of petroleum as well as the Clean Air Act? We're talking kind of a double taxation situation?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know how you get around it. I mean, obviously, we've been saying for years that the companies, these larger companies that aren't even from Washington State, are just going to pass the cost on to the consumer.
Well, I can tell you, on top of all the taxes, Keith, the way I see it scored right now, you've got $4.5 billion in general taxes, $1 billion payroll tax with long-term health care, and 2 potential property tax increases both at the state and local level. Is that somewhere in the hunt? And are we done?
Well, I don't know about being done, because until we finally see the documents, I mean, and of course I'm only relying on what I've been told, how things have been in the past. I mean, and when I say the past, I mean historically, not just this session, but I mean when you look at the many times that we've had similar situations, it's not unheard of to end up right at the end and then find out that things fall apart. But those revenue projections that you're mentioning, they are all certainly, at least what I'm hearing, they're very much in the potential. And if that really does transpire that way, I mean, it is, Mike mentioned that these are, to me, from my perspective, I mean, these are taxes that the state really doesn't need to do in order to be a good, solid state government. And, as I've mentioned, through this whole session, I'm seeing it right now, we come right down to the line. We'll be talking about that 20% increase in a budget that everyone else is having to live with far less. That 1% looms really large. And I think, the local taxpayer looking at it, thinking about this, well, how is it that the state can just, be unfettered in their search for more dollars and generating more money? And, we need to be thankful for the good economy that we do have in the state. But I don't really think that, when you take something that's working well, that you just continue to pile on and more tax, because it does create an environment where people are less likely to, expand their businesses, to, come to this state even. I mean, we have plenty of people coming now, but if they're here and the jobs are not, then we're really going to be dealing with other issues.
Well, guys, I got to tell you, I've been out on the road the last week with a lot of small business people, and they are terrified. Bottom line is, they are talking about whether they're going to be open a year from now, whether they're going to move to Idaho, or what they're going to do. Between new payroll taxes and, of course, the minimum wage goes up to $13.50 at the end of this year. It's just a piling on effect for the small guys. The big guys can absorb it, but these little guys, they're terrified.
Well, and we will be adding, it appears, a service tax on B&O service tax increase to all of that. So those small businesses are just going to feel it even more. It's a really sad state of affairs over here when you're trying to articulate what it's like to employ 5-6 people, to keep your mom and pop shop open when it's just you, the owner, and trying to do everything from IT to HR to it's you kind of look at your bottom line and say, I don't know how I can keep doing this when Olympia doesn't seem to care whether I'm here or not.
Well, the other big story, of course, is the education situation. The teachers are rallying over in Spokane to force the legislature to raise that levy lid for even more money. And of course, editorials all over the state are saying no more. It's out of control. What is the status on education right now?
Well, that bill to do that, Carrie, was just pulled this morning to the second reading calendar, so it's looming, we'll say. I'm really concerned. Senator Rolfes doesn't appear to have the appetite. She's a Democrat. Doesn't appear to have the appetite to spend any more in education, but that doesn't mean the Senate will hold the line. I think, my concern is, and I've addressed this issue. I've addressed the issue with schools that are feeling the pinch, especially in rural districts. I addressed it through an amendment on the operating budget to do a one-time spend of $60 million to address their concerns. I don't believe that and keep in mind, Carrie, we haven't even fully implemented the McCleary decision. We will fully implement that next year for the first time ever. So people, change is hard. People need to take a break, take a deep breath, and recognize that we should not reward those school districts that decided not to either believe our projections or to ignore them entirely and just think, well, we'll spend whatever we want because we know the state legislature will come back and backfill whatever we can't afford.
Yeah, I certainly hope that doesn't happen. And as I understand it, the state property tax goes up again, too, because we backed it down to $240, but that was only a year, and that is not being renewed, so it goes up to $270. So you have a double whammy on property tax, as near as I could tell.
Well, the one thing I would say is that, I do feel like it's important that they have, some local control, but when you look back at how the McCleary decision was done, it was done with a lot of negotiating and to get to the point where they felt like they did what they could to address the needs of the districts. And so, there are some looming dynamics out there, I guess, that people, kind of fail to understand exactly how we got to where we were as far as the solution. So I don't know exactly where it's going to end up, but it's a real challenge ahead of us.
Well, I think one of the things that comes close to Mike there is that the levy, or the bond, I should say, not the levy, but the bond issue in Chelan went down by huge numbers. And I'm afraid that's going to happen again all over the state. If these property taxes come through, the chances of any school passing a bond particularly is going to be nil. Because people just can't absorb more property tax. Cost of housing is already too high. So, Mike, how do you feel about how that ended up?
Well, I think you're right, Carrie. I was disappointed to actually see the bond fail. But, the thing is, we recognize we were actually watching that bond very, very closely over here in the state because, as you know, I sit on the capital budget, negotiating the capital budget this year, and that would have impacts to SCAP, School Construction Assistance Program, which automatically obligates the state to pay for a portion of that project. I, again, was disappointed to see the bond fail. But I think there is a lot of trepidation around what we're doing with education. And I think a big reason it did fail is because people are feeling like we're spending so much money on education without really a vote of the people. We're just mandating it the state is mandating we just spend all these dollars and not giving local voters a chance to decide their own fate around property taxes. It's a challenge, and I understand it.
Well, let's go to another issue for just a moment here. A couple of other issues. Looks like daylight savings time permanently is at least on its way to Congress. But another one that's come up is this initiative, Affirmative Action Initiative, which would reinstate affirmative action. Is that moving through the House? Is that going to get out? Because it's an initiative to the legislature, so they either act on it or they put it to the people. And I guess there's still a possibility they pass it out of the legislature, which shocks me.
I don't know, Carrie, if that's going to have the legs. I think right now, the focus is there's a real challenge because as I've been sitting in these budget negotiations, the challenge is not between the Republicans and the Democrats, it's between the Democrats and the Democrats, right? Between the two rotundas, between the Senate and the House. So all of the oxygen in the room right now is being consumed by trying to get out on time because I think they realize that if they can't get out on time, the optics of having total control of the state legislature and of the governor's mansion and you still can't agree on a budget may not bode well.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. They weren't too happy with us the last few years. And this, they said, I think they even said in their campaigns, well, if we ran this thing, that would never happen. Well, here we go. We'll see. All right. Well, we're running a little short of time, and I know you guys got to get back. So what else would you like to add? Tell the folks back home. Now, when this airs, I might remind people, when this airs, we'll either be in special session or we won't. We're a little ahead of the curve here, a couple of days. But how do you feel about the perspective of going into special session?
Well, there's a very real possibility. Everything is very, very delicate right now. An emergency meeting of the appropriations was called this evening, which, as you know, Carrie, you served on that for a long time. I get the opportunity to serve on that now. It's sort of an indicator that they're getting close because they need to pass their final tax bills in order to seal up the budget. But anything can fall apart. We still have major assumptions inside the capital budget that we have not fully negotiated because we've been waiting on an operating budget. So it's tenuous.
Well, Keith, I didn't think you were going to get out of there in 105. Sorry. But if you do, that'll be really something. But what do you think?
I'm in one of the camps where we just kind of sit and wait. We wait and be told that then we're going to do something, and we may or may not. But I'm hopeful that we'll be done. But that's just a hope.
Well, I'll tell you what. I talked to your leadership yesterday. J.T. Wilcox gave me a call, and he said you two guys are doing a fantastic job over there. So just keep the throttle down. Do what you can. It's tough being in the minority. I was there a long time. But I think you guys have put up a great fight. So we'll look forward to seeing you next week, one way or the other. We'll stay in contact and see if you're going to be back in this studio or maybe, hopefully, home. But I guess we won't know for a few days. But thanks for being with us and taking the time. Keep up the good fight.
Thanks, Gary.
All right. Well, there you have it. There's not a lot of news right now. By the time this show airs, you'll have a little more news. But I suspect we might see special session because it looks like our Democrat friends can't quite come to grips with how much they're going to charge us for their budget. We'll be right back with the 12th District. Well, there you have it, folks. Are we done with In Session or aren't we? We don't know yet, but we'll find out soon. We'll be following it no matter what moving forward. And when the session's over, we're going to have a lot of special guests on this show talking about, well, some of those controversial bills, some of the subjects. We're also going to do some solutions programs talking about how we can fix some of these things like housing and health care and energy and all the things that don't seem to be getting done in Congress. Well, I like to end the show with something a little bit fun. I subscribe to a lot of different emails, and I love the fundraising letters, particularly from the left side of the political spectrum. Here are some I've gotten in just the last week. The world will end in just 12 years if we don't have a Green Deal, so send us money, please. Social Security will end under Trump if we don't get money right now. Please contribute. Trump will destroy Yellowstone by next year if we don't get money. Please send a contribution. NPR will be shut down almost as soon as possible if we don't get a contribution. It goes on and on and on. Republicans will end health care for everyone as we know it if we don't get a contribution. Well, the right side does it too. I got to be fair. But some of these I'm getting are so ridiculous. This is the state of today's politics. It has gotten a little out of control. Well, we'll keep you in control here at the 12th District. We'll be back next week to see whether we're in session or out of session. I guess we won't know till then. This is Kerry Condado reporting for NCW Life. Don't forget, you can find all these shows on demand at ncwlife.com. There are some great ones, and we'll have some more coming up for you. Stay tuned.